So I was wondering if you are late for Mass, does it still fulfill your Sunday obligation, and or at what point can or cannot receive Holy Eucharist?
Great. That is a very good question. Thank you for it. We were told in seminary that on Sundays and holy days that you had up until when the veil came off of the chalice to be there in order to fulfill your obligation. So that would be sort of after the homily, after the creed, and then the priest would take the veil off the chalice, or I guess in solemn high masses would be the subdeacon, and then that would be the point where you have to be there in order for it to count to fulfill your obligation. In some parishes, they even have the servers ring a bell at that point, so people kind of know if they made it by the bell or not.
It's presumed, yeah, as long as you arrive for, we call commonly today the Mass of the Faithful, that you fulfilled your obligation.
The reason why Sunday Mass obligation hinges traditionally on the Mass of the Faithful, so-called, that is to say from the moment of the offertory into the moment of the priest's communion under both species, is precisely because the essence of Holy Mass is, in its ritual form, is the double consecration of the body and blood of our Lord. And so at the offertory, the Eucharistic species are vowed to our Lord, so to speak. They're offered to him in an irrevocable way. In case many of you listeners, viewers are unaware, that bread which has been offered to our Lord, wine that has been offered to our Lord, if for whatever reason an accident should befall those species, or the priest be unable to use them at the moment of the consecration, which has already happened to me, to be honest, had a fly in my chalice, the wine can no longer be used in a normal fashion. It's already been offered to our Lord in an irrevocable way, and so it needs to be disposed of in a respectful manner. And that is to say, it needs to go down the sacrarium, direct in through a pipe in the sacristy that goes directly into the earth. And so the offertory is already a moment where we're already looking forward, one could say, in an irrevocable way towards that double consecration. So that's why your obligation to assist at Holy Mass on Sunday is fulfilled by your attendance from inclusively the offertory to inclusively the communion of the priests under both kinds, because the very essence of Mass, tracing it back to the institution by our Lord himself in its ritual form, is that double consecration.
I would just kind of point out that in some iterations of the 6 precepts of the Church, the precept says you're supposed to be there and assist at the entire Mass. So it's not a good status quo to say like, hey, let's shoot for like arriving at the epistle or whatever, and kind of get our sweet spot right there. That's not good enough. We have to be there for the entirety of Mass. It also means that we don't do the Judas shuffle after Mass and receive communion and head out the door. So Judas left early for the first Mass, and we should not leave early for Mass either. Be that as it may, more than the legalistic details of it, how far can I push this? So the old rule was, if the veil is still on the chalice, then you're good. Recently, since I guess the 1980s, so the 1983 Code of Canon Law, there's been more of an emphasis on the readings. And so now there's more of an emphasis to be there for the gospel. Like you have to be there for the proclamation of the gospel, which is the standard in the Novus Ordo.
So there's 2 separate things here. There's the fulfillment of the obligation to assist at Mass on Sunday, and that's something entirely separate from receiving Holy Communion. Receiving Holy Communion is not the obligation on Sunday. No one's ever required to receive Holy Communion on any particular day, in the year. It's once a year during Eastertide, but it's not on any particular Sunday.
As for when we should receive or not Holy Communion, if we arrive late, the question to ask, first of all, would be why you arrived late. Was it because of a lack of preparation, a lack of foresight? Is it a certain sloth or a lack of prudence? If the reason for which you've arrived late is a culpable reason, then that may be a good reason to abstain from Holy Communion, even if you do find yourself, you believe, in a state of grace, then namely because you haven't prepared yourself properly to receive Holy Communion. We should remember that with any sacrament, but especially with the Blessed Sacrament, that its reception necessitates a commensurate preparation. Nevertheless, if you were late for reasons that entirely escaped your control, I don't see why, as long as you arrive, of course, at the due time to fulfill your Sunday obligation, why you couldn't receive Holy Communion as well.
Yeah, simply if you've arrived late and it's not beyond that point, of the offertory, going into the canon, it's not as though you've missed Mass, so to speak. If it would be beyond that, then yes, not only should you not receive communion, but you should you have to find another mass on Sunday. So yeah, but keep those two things distinct. It's not as though one necessarily implies the other. I did this in my youthful days too. When I was a student, if I knew that I showed up too late at mass, even if it wasn't to stop me from fulfilling my obligation, I would simply say, well, out of a spirit of penance, I would kind of I would usually be in the back anyway, because I showed up late and I didn't want to go up to the front and let everybody know that I showed up late. I would, just out of spirit of penance, just sort of abstain from Holy Communion.
Canon, I'm curious about the story of what you had to do after you found the fly in the chalice. And I heard that liturgically, one of the reasons for the pall is also very pragmatic, or practical, which is in order to prevent particles or foreign substances from falling into the blood.
Absolutely, and if anyone's interested and is in faint of heart, there's an entire section in the Roman Missal of the traditional rite called the De Defectivus. That is to say, anything that could happen that could possibly obstruct, prevent priests from using the objects from completing the offering of Holy Mass. And so there's one article concerning the defects of the wine prior to the consecration, but after the offertory. So I remember. I was a newly ordained priest. I looked into the chalice moments before speaking the words of consecration of the wine, had a fly in my chalice. So I had no choice. The wine needed to be disposed of. And because it says very specifically in the De Defectivus that if there's any foreign substance there, and it specifically names flies, that there should be new wine brought. And so what happens is the priest very quickly, he offers the new wine with a new drop of water. He offers that with the same offertory prayer before proceeding to the consecration once again. What is beautiful about the De Defectivus of the Roman Missals, it shows, first of all, the great care of our fathers in the faith in their offering of Holy Mass, how seriously they took the reverence due to the most blessed sacrament. And not only that the Holy Mother Church, in her long experience, no less in liturgy than in morals and in doctrine, has really seen almost everything that human nature has to throw at her. What do you do if the chalice freezes before the consumption of the sacred species after the consecration? So little things like that. It really shows you that we have a mother who has really not neglected anything in our spiritual care and even in these practical details concerning the holiest of our mysteries.